Just a few days ago, I called my dear sister, Dr. Petty, and said to her that we needed to do more than a press release, an individual prayer in our own individual houses of worship, but we needed to come together. And so I greet you, Assalamu alaikum, I greet you, Shalom, and I greet you with grace and with peace. On behalf of the NAACP, the Forward Together Moral Movement, and I pastor Greenleaf Christian Church, and I'm with the Disciples of Christ here in this state and in this nation and this world. Proverbs 6 says there are 6 things the Lord hates: proud eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, and a false witness who pours out lies and stirs up conflict in the community. 1 John 4:20 in the Christian Bible says, if anyone says, I love God, but hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love their brother whom he has seen, how can he love God whom he's not seen? And I'm reminded in the Christmas season that we celebrate as Christians with all of the glitz and the glamour that we so often use in a way that's really not pertaining to our Christmas season. The first Christmas was filled with blood because a politician spoke a word that unleashed a killing spree, kill all of those who are not like us, who are boys. That was because of the words of a politician. We come here today, and I hope not only to speak here, Mom, but to join you in worship and to hear you preach, and I invite other Christian pastors to do so. We must come out of our places of isolation. And on February the 13th, we're going to have a mass moral march on Raleigh, and I want to ask all clergy of all faiths to join in leading at the head of that march as we call for a more just society. Since the Republican presidential frontrunner announced after the San Bernardino killing that he would close America's borders to Muslims, it's interesting to me when that was said, it was right around the anniversary of the 60th anniversary of the first mass moral march, the first mass meeting of the Montgomery bus boycott. That's when I heard it, as I was in Montgomery preaching at the same church where they held the first meeting to open up America. I hear someone talking about closing America. An issue about what radicalization means has now lifted, and how we protect ourselves as a nation. The so-called liberals and even some in the Republican Party mainstreams have said not all Muslims have been radicalized. And to this particular candidate, whose name is Trump, says until we know which ones have been, let's keep them all out. The unquestioned consensus in America's public square is that we can only be safe by figuring out who the un-American terrorists are and getting rid of this. And I heard a woman responding to him the other day saying, yes, we have to stop those people. One politician said of Trump's statement, I think it was Paul Ryan, that his statements were un-American. But I'd also like to say taking people's voting rights is un-American. Castigating people because of their sexuality is un-American. Another one, I think it was Bush, Jeb Bush said that Trump and Obama are the two most polarizing. And to compare what President Obama has tried to do in health care and in voting and in living wages to what Trump is doing is irresponsible at the least, at best, and nothing but another form of political terrorism at worst. But the problem is not Trump. Be careful. The problem is a climate that allowed him in the first place, that was first created when some of the same people who are now criticizing him started using the term radical Islam as a politically race-baiting term. And many of us, all of us in some ways, have to repent that we didn't stand up then. We should have never allowed that term to go unchallenged. When they first began calling President Obama a Muslim, it didn't matter if he was. There's no religious test in America. It's a form of divisive and race baiting. And what has happened now is they have sown to the wind and reaped the whirlwind. They have labored in the laboratory of racism and Islamophobia and fear and hate and xenophobia, and now have created a Frankenstein atmosphere of hatred that is out of control. But even more than this hate stirring it up or engaging in it is not about just being un-American, it's ungodly. It's ungodly. And the issue is not so much what the hate mongers say, but the greater tragedy would be if we would remain silent. So let us speak now. First of all, here in North Carolina, we should not be so naive to try to blame everything on Muslims. We have a disproportionate share of homegrown terrorists. Before he moved to Colorado to carry out his attack on Planned Parenthood, Robert Deere was apparently thinking these things in the mountains. After assassinating Reverend Pickney and 8 members of Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, where did Dalen Roof fled to? Shelby, North Carolina. A hotbed of Klan activity where the author of Birth of the Nation was born and wrote from. That's where he was apprehended. He later confessed that he committed the shootings in hope of igniting a race war. He had a website entitled The Last Rhodesian. And interestingly enough, he said that he was inspired by what had happened in terms of the Trayvon Martin killing. And let us not forget the man who killed Muslim students in Chapel Hill. And let us not forget the case North Carolina's never really dealt with, the KKK killing and massacre in Greensboro in the 1970s. But interestingly, Nancy, we do not call any of these men or persons radical Christians. So why then do we so easily accept the term radical Islam? In fact, my dear sister, I don't think the problem is radicalization, because Dr. King talked about we needed a radical revolution of moral values. And he was criticized for saying that, and he was talking about love. Dr. King talked about being a radical for love and a radical for justice. What we have to look at is acts of terror. Terror. And that's the issue. Terror that is perpetrated by whoever when they use fear to try to gain political power. And in America, we have to be honest that we have a long history of political strategies worked carefully to color immigrants and members of the LGBT community and religious minorities, and first cast them as un-American or as non-white, then using that philosophy to so-called discriminate and sometimes exterminate them. The rise of ISIS is as real. It's a credible threat. And some, however, see that as an opportunity to use once again the racist form of political manipulation that can take a form of calling Muslims un-American, just like black men and women were called un-American. And when there was a call for integration, the teaching was that black men would be violent and would destroy if they were allowed to join with other people. So finally, there are 7 to 10 million Muslims in this country. Our militaries, our schools, our governments are here in this country. We must not allow candidates of either party to condemn the murders in San Bernardino without acknowledging their own role in this nation's violence with their words and their language. Coretta Coretta Scott King, after her husband was shot down, said something we need to hear again, Nancy. She said, violence is not just killing someone. She said, violence is starving a child. Violence is suppressing a culture. Violence is neglecting school children. Violence is discrimination against working people. Violence is ghetto housing. Violence is ignoring medical needs. Violence is a contempt for equality. And then she said, violence is also a lack of willpower to help humanity and deal with the issues of injustice. I'm through. But I want you finally to know that we've had nearly 300 incidents of mass murders in this country this year, and they weren't mostly by people who happen to be brown or Muslim. We've had 40,000 incidents of gun violence. We've had 1,052 mass shootings in 1,066 days, Imam. If we don't fear anything, we need to fear our appetite for violence. And the only thing that can change that appetite is a changing of our souls and of our hearts. And so, let us resist every stereotype and pledge to work that we might be one nation under God. Indivisible, 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 with liberty and justice for all. That's our work, and that is the work before us.